What if the entire world woke up tomorrow operating under a single global economy? No competing currencies, no national economic borders, no independent financial systems. Just one unified framework governing trade, labor, capital, and value for every nation, every corporation, every individual on Earth. Right now, the world is already more connected than at any other point in history. Global supply chains span continents. Digital currencies move faster than governments can regulate. Megacorporations operate beyond borders, and crises ripple across markets in seconds. What we call the global economy already behaves like a single organism, reacting, adapting, and sometimes collapsing in unison. But this is different. This is not coordination, this is convergence. Imagine a moment when a single decision, driven by efficiency, crisis management, or AI optimization, eliminates economic fragmentation altogether. A world where one system replaces hundreds, where monetary policy, trade rules, and financial logic are standardized at planetary scale. This is not science fiction. It's an alternate economy built from real pressures shaping today's world economy. In this global economy, what if nations don't disappear, but their economic sovereignty begins to fade? AI doesn't just assist decision-making. It becomes a backbone of allocation, forecasting, and optimization. Megacorporations are no longer market players. They are structural pillars, and individuals are no longer citizens of national economies, but participants in a single, continuous economic simulation. Stay with me until the end of the simulation, because what you're about to discover may change how you see future predictions about growth, stability, and power. This timeline doesn't begin with collapse or revolution. It begins quietly, with integration, efficiency, and promises of stability. And maybe that's what makes it dangerous. Because once the entire planet runs on one economic engine, there is no external system left to fail into, no alternative model to escape to, only adjustments within the system itself. And it's exactly here, at the moment when unification first feels inevitable, that this alternate timeline begins to take shape. As we step into this unfolding simulation, it's worth pausing for a brief moment. Not to break the flow, but to deepen it. If this scenario resonates with you, if a single global economy feels plausible or unsettling, say it in a few words in the comments. That signal matters. It tells the system that thoughtful discussions about alternate futures of the global economy deserve to reach more people who are asking the same questions. And if this exploration adds value to how you think about future predictions, AI-driven systems, and the quiet rise of megacorporations, a simple like helps this kind of analysis stay visible. Subscribing, if it feels right, means staying connected as we continue mapping other what-if economy timelines, some more optimistic, others far more fragile. Because this isn't just content. It's a shared investigation into where economic logic might be taking us. Now, with that moment anchored, the timeline moves forward. The decision has been made. The framework is in place. And in the first few years of this unified system, the real consequences begin to surface. Subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. In the first years of this new timeline, the world doesn't feel radically different at a glance. Borders still exist. Flags still fly. Governments still speak in the language of sovereignty. But beneath the surface, something fundamental begins to dissolve. National currencies start converging into a unified monetary system. Tax codes are standardized. Trade rules lose their regional exceptions. Economic identity, once tied to nations, quietly migrates toward a single global framework. Markets react first. Volatility spikes as investors attempt to price a system that has no historical precedent. Assets once considered safe lose their old meaning, while new forms of value emerge almost overnight. Workers feel the shift in more personal ways. Jobs are no longer protected or limited by national labor markets. A programmer in Lagos competes directly with one in Berlin. A logistics worker in Vietnam is evaluated by the same productivity algorithms as someone in Texas. The promise is efficiency. The cost is uncertainty. As months turn into years, governments realize they are no longer economic architects. They become operators inside a larger machine. Central banks, once the ultimate monetary authorities, transition into regional executors of globally defined policy. Interest rates, liquidity, and credit allocation are no longer tools of national strategy, but variables optimized by AI-driven economic models designed to stabilize the entire system at once. Megacorporations adapt faster than anyone else. Already borderless, they align seamlessly with the new order. Their internal supply chains become more powerful than many former states. Decision-making accelerates. Scale becomes destiny. In the background, a quiet truth emerges from the backstage of this future. Power hasn't disappeared. It has condensed. Now I want to go deeper into this scenario. As the decade unfolds, the global economy reorganizes itself into functional zones rather than political ones. Regions are optimized for energy production, data processing, manufacturing, or food systems. Influence is no longer measured by territory, but by control over algorithms, infrastructure, and resources. New blocks rise, not as nations, but as AI-coordinated economic ecosystems. This is where transformation becomes irreversible. From here, two extreme paths begin to form. In one, automation and coordination unlock an abundance economy. Costs fall, access expands. Basic needs become universally affordable. Stability replaces crisis. In the other, efficiency masks concentration. Wealth, data, and decision-making collapse into a narrow layer of entities capable of steering the system. The economy functions perfectly, just not for everyone. When this new order finally stabilizes, the deepest impact is no longer financial. It's psychological. Work loses its traditional meaning. Competition feels abstract. Purpose becomes harder to define. A collective mentality forms around optimization rather than aspiration. People begin questioning their role inside a system that no longer reflects individual struggle, only systemic performance. This is the hidden journey of this future, the quiet transformation of identity itself. And before we go further into what lies beyond this point, pause for a moment and leave a trace of your presence in this timeline. Comment, "That makes sense to me." As the timeline moves into years 3 through 7, the shift becomes impossible to ignore. What once felt like a technical adjustment now reveals its true scale. Governments are still present, still visible, but their role has fundamentally changed. They no longer design economic direction. They administer outcomes. National leaders speak less about growth strategies and more about compliance, alignment, and system stability. Economic power migrates upward, away from capitals, and into global frameworks that operate beyond any single electorate. Central banks are among the first institutions to transform completely. Their traditional tools, interest rates, monetary expansion, currency defense, are absorbed into a unified logic. Decisions are no longer debated publicly. They are calculated. AI-driven models analyze trillions of data points in real time, optimizing inflation, employment, and liquidity not for one nation, but for the entire system. The promise is fewer crises. The trade-off is opacity. The logic works, but few understand how. Megacorporations, meanwhile, enter what can only be described as a golden acceleration. With regulatory fragmentation gone, production, logistics, and labor flows become frictionless. Supply chains stretch across continents as if distance no longer matters. Labor is allocated dynamically, priced globally, evaluated algorithmically. In the backstage of this future, a quiet truth takes shape. Corporations no longer respond to governments. Governments increasingly respond to them. Emergency policies emerge as inequality spikes in unexpected places. Regions once protected by national advantages lose their buffer. Others surge forward. Universal income experiments appear. Mobility credits. Res-killing mandates. These measures are framed as temporary stabilizers, but over time they become permanent features of the system. The transformation is not chaotic. It is controlled. And that is what unsettles people most. Now I want to go even deeper into this scenario. As the decade progresses, the global economy reorganizes itself into new centers of gravity. Power is no longer tied to flags or borders, but to data density, energy access, and computational capacity. Entire regions evolve into specialized economic organisms. Some become AI coordination hubs. Others turn into resource engines. Others fade into logistical peripheries. This is a moment when new blocks of power emerge, not political alliances, but economic ecosystems synchronized by algorithms. From this structure, two extreme futures begin to crystallize. In one path, efficiency unlocks abundance. Automation reduces scarcity. Goods become cheaper, faster, cleaner. Work becomes optional rather than mandatory. Human life reorganizes around creativity, learning, and exploration. Stability becomes a norm. Crisis becomes rare. In the other path, efficiency conceals concentration. Ownership narrows. Decision-making compresses. The system runs flawlessly, but participation becomes conditional. Value flows upward. People are supported, but monitored. Sustained, but constrained. This is a hidden fork in the road, the revelation buried beneath optimization. When this new order finally stabilizes, the deepest impact is not economic. It is existential. Daily routines lose their old structure. Careers feel temporary. Competition feels abstract. A collective mentality emerges, less driven by ambition, more by alignment. People begin to question where meaning comes from when survival is guaranteed, but agency feels diluted. This is not collapse. It is transformation. And before we uncover what ultimately tips the system toward one outcome or the other, take a moment to anchor yourself in this journey. Comment, I'm on this journey too. As years 7 through 15 unfold, the world enters a phase that feels less like reform and more like redefinition. The old economic map, built on alliances, treaties, and historical blocks, begins to fade. In its place, a new structure quietly takes hold. The global economy no longer organizes itself around nations or ideology, but around function. Regions are optimized, calibrated, and ranked by what they provide to the system. Some zones become dense centers of data and computation, housing the servers and AI models that coordinate global decision-making. Others evolve into energy cores, feeding the system with renewables, nuclear grids, and storage infrastructure. Manufacturing concentrates where automation reaches peak efficiency, while vast logistical corridors connect everything in near real time. This is not globalization, as the world once knew it. This is specialization at planetary scale. Now I want to go even deeper into the scenario, because this is the moment when new forms of power fully emerge. AI economic superpowers rise, not as countries, but as networks. Their influence is measured not in territory, but in algorithmic efficiency, predictive accuracy, and control over critical resources. They don't negotiate through diplomacy. They recalibrate systems. They don't project force. They shape incentives. From the outside, the transition appears smooth. From the inside, it feels irreversible. As this new order stabilizes, two extreme futures begin to pull the system in opposite directions. In one version of this timeline, coordination delivers on its promise. Scarcity declines. Automation absorbs labor shocks. Access to goods, services, and knowledge expands dramatically. People are freed from survival-based decisions and begin redefining success, contribution, and personal growth. This is the abundance economy, quiet, efficient, and stable. In the other version, the same efficiency amplifies concentration. Ownership of infrastructure, data, and AI models narrows further. Participation in the economy remains universal, but influence does not. Life is predictable, supported, and optimized, but tightly bounded. Choice exists, but only within parameters defined elsewhere. This is the truth hidden in the backstage of this future. Over time, the deepest impact is no longer structural. It's human. Daily routines change. Work becomes modular. Careers lose permanence. The idea of progress shifts from accumulation to alignment. A new collective mentality forms, less driven by ambition, more by system compatibility. People begin questioning where meaning comes from when decisions are optimized externally, and struggle is no longer the defining force of life. This is the real journey of this timeline, not the rise of AI or the fall of borders, but the transformation of identity itself. And before we cross into what ultimately determines which version of this future becomes permanent, pause for a moment inside the simulation. Comment, this future feels real. As this unified system matures, the global economy reaches a critical inflection point. The same architecture, the same algorithms, the same decisions begin producing radically different outcomes depending on who controls the levers beneath the surface. This is where the timeline splits, not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, through thousands of micro-decisions made inside models few people ever see. In one path, automation fulfills its long-promised role. Productivity explodes while costs collapse. Energy becomes abundant. Manufacturing becomes hyper-efficient. Food systems stabilize. Universal access to basic goods is no longer a policy debate, but a logistical reality. Economic anxiety fades from daily life. People are no longer forced into decisions purely for survival. Stability becomes a default state of the system. This is the abundance economy. Not utopian, not emotional, but mathematically balanced. Over the years, this version reshapes human behavior. When scarcity retreats, fear follows. Education becomes continuous. Creativity becomes valuable again. Risk becomes intellectual rather than existential. The collective mentality shifts from competition to contribution. Growth still exists, but it is measured in resilience and capability rather than accumulation. The journey feels lighter. The system feels humane. But now I want to go even deeper into the other path, because the same efficiency can produce a very different revelation. In this version of the timeline, coordination masks concentration. Automation replaces labor faster than ownership is redistributed. Data consolidates. Infrastructure centralizes. Decision-making collapses upward into a narrow layer of institutions capable of managing planetary complexity. The economy runs flawlessly. Markets are stable, logistics precise, crises rare, but influence becomes scarce. People are supported, but not empowered. Access exists, but agency is limited. The system predicts needs before individuals articulate them. Choice becomes optimized. Life becomes smooth, predictable, and quietly constrained. This is not collapse. It is a perfectly functioning imbalance. Over time, the impact moves inward. Work feels optional but meaningless. Progress feels abstract. Identity detaches from effort. A subtle tension grows beneath stability, a sense that something essential has been outsourced. This is a truth hidden in the backstage of this future. When decision-making is centralized enough, freedom doesn't disappear. It dissolves. As this order stabilizes, society adapts. People learn to navigate rather than challenge. Purpose becomes personal, not structural. A new mental framework takes hold. Less about changing the system, more about fitting within it. The transformation is quiet, almost invisible, but irreversible. And standing at this fork in the timeline, the future remains unresolved, not because the system fails, but because its final shape depends on values encoded long before most people notice. Before we move into what ultimately decides which of these paths becomes permanent, leave a simple marker of your presence here. Comment, I see both futures. As this unified global economy settles into its long-term rhythm, the most profound changes are no longer visible on charts or dashboards. They unfold quietly inside homes, routines, and inner lives. In the early years, people focus on adapting, learning new systems, new rules, new metrics of value. But over time, adaptation gives way to reflection. When work, income, and competition are fundamentally redefined, a deeper question emerges. What is a person for in a system that no longer needs their struggle to function? Along the decade, traditional career paths dissolve. Lifelong professions become rare. Work fragments into projects, contributions, and algorithmically matched tasks. For some, this feels liberating. For others, disorienting. Income arrives with less friction, sometimes detached entirely from effort. Survival fades as a daily concern, but so does a familiar sense of earning one's place. The impact is subtle but persistent, shaping a new mental landscape. Now I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because culture itself begins to shift. Ambition no longer points upward in a clear hierarchy. Success is no longer defined by accumulation alone. In some regions, status comes from creativity, learning, or social contribution. In others, It comes from alignment, how well one fits into the optimized flow of the system. The economy no longer belongs to nations, and increasingly, it doesn't feel like it belongs to individuals either. It belongs to humanity in aggregate, managed as a continuous process. This produces a collective mental reset. Competition softens, but so does urgency. Decisions feel lighter, yet less consequential. People gain time, but must decide what that time is for. Some rediscover community, art, exploration. Others experience a quiet emptiness, a sense that meaning has been abstracted away along with scarcity. This is the truth hidden in the backstage of this future. Removing struggle does not automatically create purpose. When this new order stabilizes, identity becomes fluid. People are less defined by profession, nationality, or economic class. They are defined by participation patterns, contribution scores, learning trajectories. The journey becomes internal. Questions once answered by work, who am I? What am I worth? Are no longer externally resolved. They return to the individual unanswered. And this is where the simulation becomes most fragile, because a global economy optimized for humanity still depends on human values, on what is encoded, prioritized, rewarded. The system can distribute resources flawlessly, but it cannot decide what should matter. That decision emerges from millions of small choices, cultural shifts, and silent acceptances made over time. As this timeline continues to unfold, one realization grows harder to ignore. The future of a single global economy is not determined by technology or efficiency alone, but by how humanity chooses to redefine meaning when survival is no longer the central story. Before we step into the final layer of this alternate future, leave a simple signal that you're reflecting on this journey too. Comment. I'm on this journey too. As this alternate timeline continues to unfold, one truth becomes increasingly difficult to avoid. A single global economy does not arrive as a dramatic takeover or a visible collapse. It arrives through coordination, through optimization, through a long series of decisions that each seem reasonable on their own. In the early years, it promises stability. Along the decade, it delivers efficiency. And when this new order finally stabilizes, it reveals its deepest contradiction. This system represents the highest level of economic coordination humanity has ever achieved. Crises are anticipated before they spread. Resources are allocated with precision. Waste is minimized. Volatility is absorbed from a distance. It looks like progress perfected. The world economy moves as one synchronized mechanism, guided by AI models that learn faster than any institution ever could. But now I want to go even deeper into what that coordination costs. Because as economic freedom fades quietly into background, agency becomes harder to define. Choices still exist, but they are increasingly shaped upstream, inside algorithms, governance layers, and incentive structures invisible to daily life. People are free to act, but within a system that already knows the most efficient outcome. The journey feels smooth, yet subtly guided. Comfort grows. Resistance weakens. This is the hidden tension at the heart of this future. When the economy belongs to everyone, it is no longer owned by anyone. Accountability diffuses. Control concentrates. And the question is no longer whether such a system works. It clearly does. The real question is who has the authority to change it when it no longer reflects human values. Because a perfectly optimized economy does not automatically produce a meaningful society. Over time, a quiet realization spreads to the collective mindset. Economic freedom was never just about markets or money. It was about the ability to fail, to choose inefficiently, to pursue paths that made no sense on paper. In removing friction, the system may also remove experimentation. In removing scarcity, it may remove urgency. And in removing chaos, it may remove something essential to human agency. This is not a warning. It is a reflection. A single global economy could mark the peak of human coordination, or the moment when decision-making quietly leaves human hands. The difference between those outcomes is not technological. It is ethical, cultural, invisible in the moment it matters most. And as the simulation moves closer to its final layer, one unresolved question begins to dominate everything else. Not whether humanity can build such a system, but whether it can live inside it without losing the ability to choose who it wants to become. Before we step into that next revelation, leave a trace of where you stand in this timeline. Comment, "This question matters." If you stayed with the simulation until the end, then you're already part of what this channel is about. This space exists to explore what if economy, alternate economic timelines, future predictions, and deep simulations about where the global economy might be heading when technology, power, and human values collide. Subscribing means continuing this journey together, step by step, question by question, without shortcuts. If this future made you pause or reflect, leave a simple marker in the comments. Right, this future really made me think. It's a quiet way to say you followed the entire path and engage the questions beneath the surface. And if this analysis added value to how you think about the future of the world economy, a like helps this kind of content reach others who are also searching for clarity in uncertain times. It's a small signal, but it carries weight. There's another simulation right here that connects directly with this one. A different angle, a different outcome. Click and keep going with me there, because this timeline doesn't end here. It branches. Which alternate economic future should I explore next?